One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Have you ever met someone in your journey of life where you thought, I don't know why that person was put in my path, but I'm so glad that I met them and I heard their story and just got to spend a few moments with them? Well, that is today's guest. So I'm so excited for you to hear Jordan's story and all the questions he has about podcasting and creating content, because this was a fantastic episode. So just a little backstory, and we get into it in the interview, but I met Jordan at the Ramsey Solutions influencer event in 2021. And I cannot believe it's already been, almost a year and a half since that happened, but what an incredible journey. And we get into the nitty-gritty of how we got to be there and the different things that we did while we were there. But the most memorable thing about Jordan was his ability to tell stories. And it is why I'm so grateful that he reached out to me a few weeks back and said, hey, I'd love to pick your brain about podcasting. Because there was a moment at this conference, at this event, where we sat down. It was over breakfast or over coffee. There was a big group of us. You know how it's kind of like group table seatings, and we're all going around talking about what we do or what we're interested in or the reason why we were there at this event. And whenever I started talking about podcasting, Jordan's face lit up and he said, I've been wanting to do that. I've absolutely been wanting to do that. And so flash forward to I received an email just a few weeks ago, and he said, can I pick your brain about podcasting? And I said, yeah, but the only catch is we're going to air it on the podcast so everybody can benefit from the questions that you have about getting started. So that's the conversation that you're going to hear today. And it was so fantastic. It was so, so good. So enjoy my interview with Jordan Hall. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach you how to start, launch, and market your content with confidence. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of content creation, this is the show that will help be your time-saving shortcut. So let's get right to it, shall we? But what I see for this is kind of like what you suggested, just like a coaching call. You can ask whatever questions you want. Because this is actually really good. I like doing on-air coaching calls simply because there's things that would come up that if we were just exchanging emails or something like it wouldn't be the same, because you're like, oh wait, you mentioned this, and I actually had a question about that, and I totally forgot. So, whatever questions that you have, if you want to go in a specific direction, just let me know. But yeah, do you have any other questions? Have you ever done a podcast interview before on someone else's show?
A couple times. Yeah. Okay. So still very new to just even the mechanics of all this, as you can see.
Oh, it's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah, so
you got to start somewhere.
Yep, exactly. And if I do have questions, but if I ask you something you're not comfortable, not that I'm going to get weird or anything, but if I ask you something you're not comfortable answering, then feel free, because especially since we're recording, because all kinds of questions. But I've been listening to some of your stuff, and I feel a great sense of overwhelm with not even knowing where to start. So I'm hoping you can help me with that.
Perfect.
But it looks like, so you just started doing this in 2018. Is that what I understand?
Yep.
So, to me, which I realize that now was 5 years ago, but it just seems like you've had tremendous success. So how do you explain that, first of all? And then we can go from there.
Well, we're just going to jump right in because we already started recording. So we're just going to start right there, because I think that's a great place. So I feel like success is relative, right? It's all relative, because I see peers in my industry, right, that have been doing this even longer or have been doing this the same amount of time, and they have millions and millions of downloads. And I don't have millions of downloads. If I'm being really honest, and I haven't shared too much about my stats on here, but I'm coming up on 200,000, and I've been doing this for 5 years. So it's all relative. And
sounds amazing to me.
What you say success is, right? But I think it's one of those things that it depends on your audience. It depends on what your goals are. And that's actually a few of the things that I wanted to dive into with you is what are you trying to achieve? Because then from there, success is easier to measure. But to go back to your question, I think that my measurement of success is in getting on stages, which we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about stages in a second, because I have questions to you about our shared stage experience.
Yeah.
But it's getting on stages, it's networking with people in my industry, and it's growing my business. So those are my 3 big goals with putting out consistent content on a podcast. And it's also had incredible byproducts that if you would have told me 5 years ago that I would have been these dreams would have been checked off my list, I would have said, you're crazy. What are you even talking about? So I always tell people, yes, have a goal, have some things that you're shooting for, but just be very open to the opportunities that come your way. Because like I said, there's just things that I never in a million years would have dreamed I would have done. And they've all happened because of the podcast.
Well, and that's kind of what I meant, by the way, by the success. I don't know enough about the numbers to know how much success you've had, but I know, hearing some of your story about you being a stay-at-home mom who was going to start this business online, hear that all the time. And most of the time within a week or two, that stay-at-home mom has given up that quest and didn't really materialize into anything.
Yes.
But you made it happen. So that's what I want to know. That was the genesis of that question.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I've willed it to happen. It wasn't going to happen by itself. I think it was one of those, and for anybody listening, it's the really just stubborn ability to not quit is the only reason why I'm still here 5 years later. Is no matter what, even if the numbers are telling me that I'm failing, or the fact that people are giving me feedback that I'm like, oh, I really didn't want to hear that, but I needed to hear it. It's like the little things that could easily break you when you're already in this vulnerable stage of I'm trying something new, I'm putting myself out there. It's just saying, okay, I'm going to take this feedback and I'm going to make it better. And I'm just going to keep trying. And my big thing, my big philosophy is you got to keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. So take those and like, just keep going and keep pushing forward.
So what did that look like in the beginning for you?
Oh, we're getting philosophical. So we're in therapy now. Okay.
No, very practical. I want to know what you did and how often you did it. And I mean, and I know, how many kids do you have?
Yeah, I have three boys.
Yeah. So, and you did this while also being a mom of three. I mean, it's just, I don't know. As the dad who has a stay-at-home mom, I can't get this stuff done. So I don't know how you did it or are still doing it.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things when I look back, I just turned into a sponge. At the core of everything that I was doing, I was always in research mode. So if I was going on a run, listening to a podcast, I was studying, like relentlessly studying. What are they doing? How is it formatted? What are they doing that I like? What do I not like? And I was listening to just a variety of other shows and taking a lot of mental notes. Sometimes I would, work out or listen to something, and then I would actually write notes down or put it in a Google Doc. Like I really loved how they segued from this segment into this other one, or how they interviewed the guest in this style. And I was constantly kind of just stealing ideas from other people. And at the end of the day, if I were to tell you everything that I'm doing today has been stolen from other people, you would say, no, it's you, Crystal. It's all you. It's original. And it's like, well, yeah, it's me telling my stories and telling everything. But if you break it all down fundamentally to what I'm actually creating, it's all been pieces that I've taken from what other people were doing that I liked. And then I just kind of made it my own. And that's really what I recommend, is just studying what other people are doing, become a student of your specific topic and the people that are doing it right. Because I think it's easy to look at someone like Joe Rogan and everyone's like, oh, what a Joe Rogan size podcast. It's like, well, he's had the success that he's had because of, his authority before he got started. He had this popularity, and then he's very polarizing. Like there's so many reasons why his show is as big as it is. But at the end of the day, he is himself. Like no one can take that. Like no one, no matter what they do, can replicate exactly what he's done. And I think that everyone should think about their content that way, is you have to figure out what works for you. So, you said you're a working dad, you have, I'm sure, lots of priorities and goals within yourself, and then you're presenting this podcast into your schedule. I recommend that you find something that works within your schedule, because it won't work the other way around. If you force yourself to say, oh, I really don't have time for this, but I'm going to force it and I'm going to make it, I'm going to spend hours and hours in the studio and I'm going to rip myself away from my family. And I'm going to it's not going to work. Like it's going to be something that you dread and you're done. Like you're a few episodes in and you're just like, I'm not good at this. No one's interested. I quit. And like, to your point, of other people just not sticking with it, it's usually because they haven't really created something that works within the confines of what they can do. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it also maybe solves my problem, because I feel like I've already reached that point of, and I mean, I know you do a lot of YouTube stuff too, and we can talk about that as well. Cause for me, and maybe, I know YouTube's just more of a male, world than, trends more male than, even podcasting maybe, but that's where I spend more. I literally will listen to YouTube, like won't even watch, like I'll just turn it on my phone and play it.
Yeah.
That's how I'm more likely to consume stuff than I do listen to podcasts too. But so I spend a lot of time as a consumer of YouTube, and I have done the only place I've really produced any content to date is on YouTube, just a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, you hear people say like, well, if you're doing a podcast, you might as well do YouTube, and maybe you should do them both at the same time. And if you're more comfortable on YouTube, you should start there. Like, how do you filter all this? How do you figure out, and then you have to figure out what exactly is my message, all that. Just so much, Crystal. How do you drill down and figure out what you're going to start with?
Well,
and get to and like you said, get to a point where you can actually produce it and not, I feel like I have, 15 million ideas and I've got about 4 hours a week. Yeah. And I can, a little bit of my struggle here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, this is the question I get asked most often. I get asked this question like 10 times a week. I'm not joking you. I have people saying, how do you do this? Like, how do you do both of them? When is it time for me to do both? How should it work? And so I can tell you how it works for me. And then I'll tell you if I were starting all over, how I would do it today. So I always tell people to get comfortable on one platform first. So if you're going to do YouTube, get started there. Like some people have this like really like it's a realistic like anxiety about video. I don't want to be on video. I don't want to show my face. I don't want to. And so if that is you, like if you're listening to this and you hear that, audio may be the place for you to start. For me, I read so much of my scripts in the very beginning. And so it didn't make sense for me to be on video because I don't have a teleprompter. I wasn't going to invest all this equipment. I'm like, I could buy a $20 microphone. You actually can't see it. It's just out of view. Oh, there it is. That microphone. Oh, that's right there. That was my $20 microphone. I got started. That's about how much money I had to invest in this podcast when I got started, because I was like, I can't buy a camera. I can't buy all this really fancy stuff. So I went the route of podcasting because it was inexpensive. I didn't have to be on camera. And I figured I could kind of stumble my way through it behind closed doors because people, they don't have to see me in any kind of way. So in that regard, it was easier for me to get started with podcasting, get my feet, like plant the foundation. And then I moved over to YouTube. Now, if I were starting today, right? So if you're just getting started, if anybody's listening is just getting started, I do think that YouTube will probably for the next few years still have better discoverability than podcasting. That's the unfortunate thing about podcast is there's just not the searchability for you to discover a brand new show that you love. Like it doesn't play the same games as the other algorithms and the other platforms. So it's a lot harder. So if your goal is to build an audience faster, get out in front of more people, I do recommend starting on YouTube and then stripping the audio and using it as a podcast. The only challenge with this is you can't be too visual first focused on your YouTube channel to where it doesn't make sense as an audio experience. That's where people, I think if they're like, oh, I'm going to share my screen and they're doing all this, it's like, well, I don't know what's on your screen. I'm on a jog. I'm driving down the street. I don't know what you're sharing. So, if you're comfortable on video, then I go the route of doing it, doing your podcast and videos on YouTube, because learning both platforms at the same time can actually help you. And I do know that YouTube is working on getting podcast up and running on their platform. So everything's kind of moving in that direction anyway.
I got you. So you were from the beginning, and maybe you still do, it doesn't sound like it, but you were scripting your podcast episodes.
Yeah.
Is that what I heard?
I actually went back to more scripted episodes here recently, and it's for no other reason than I want to have almost all of my show notes that live on my website done by the time I go to do it, because I'll do it in phases. I kind of batch everything. So I batch plan my episodes, meaning I will have, I'll sit down once a quarter and I'll say, okay, I'm going to talk about this, and this month, especially because I only do one episode a week now. I used to 2 episodes a week and 3, it was a lot of content. So it was a lot of planning. But now I'll plan like, okay, for the month of February, I'm going to talk about A, B, C, and D. And then I'll say, am I going to use these as YouTube videos as well? And if the answer is yes, then okay, I will plan the podcast episode and the YouTube video at the same time, which usually it ends up being about the same exact content. I do them separately. So that's like point of reference for anybody that hasn't caught that. Like my podcast and my YouTube videos are separate. I don't just strip the audio out. I don't recommend that for people just getting started. That's a more advanced step, but I just want to throw that out there. But what happens is I will write out a loose script. So it's basically an outline where I start with bullet points and then I kind of beef them up a little bit and say, where can I add more story? Where can I add some facts or figures or, some resources that could really beef up this episode to add more value. But that's also because I have an educational podcast. So that won't fit the audience for everyone. And that was going to be my question to you. Who is your audience? Like, let's talk about your podcast for a little bit and see like how we can kind of cater more of this talk specifically to what you're building and what you're creating. Actually, Jordan, you haven't even fully introduced yourself. Like, introduce yourself to everyone listening right now.
Well, that's a great question and makes it a struggle to introduce myself because I feel like I've got to drill down on what all my messaging and all that sort of thing. But so today as far as my day job, I am a real estate broker. And I also own a small construction business, and I love business. I also love money and investing and all that sort of thing. Our mutual friend, Dave Ramsey, is one of my heroes. So anyway, I really like to share on topics, personal finance, investing, real estate, all that sort of thing. So that is generally my sort of the theme, some of the themes I'd like to talk about, but I don't necessarily, I know one of the things I'm aware of is I don't have like a cohesive, coherent central message now. So it makes it tough to know. That's part of the issue that makes it, I feel like it makes it hard for me to figure out where I want to start. And maybe I have more groundwork to do there. I don't know. Coach, where would you take me next?
Yes. Well, I'm already thinking the two things that I hear that you could use, I'll call them your umbrella topic, because some of the little things that you mentioned would fit underneath is either business or finance. I mean, those or both. It could be a business financial podcast, however you want to look at it. Because if you wanted to talk about, let's say, motivational topics for someone starting their own business or getting a real estate license or starting a construction company, working with subcontractors, like there's so many things that you can fit under the broader category of business and finance. But where I would recommend, so that's like your big niche, right? Like your big topic. And so how you get to a more specific audience is thinking about who you want to talk to kind of more in the lines of like a demographic. So you could look at it as, dads. You could look at it as people that have, cause I know you said you have, you used to be a lawyer as well.
Yeah. Well, that's another part of my story is I went to law school. And it, like a lot of people these days went to school to figure out what I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
So, and while I was in school, paying for school, I got my real estate license and figured out, man, when people meet with their real estate broker, they usually have a smile on their face. When they meet with their lawyer, they normally have a frown on their face. So I'm going to go this direction.
But it's funny because I'm like, oh my gosh, there's your niche right there. Because I can't even tell you how many lawyers, like quote unquote, that I've met that are not lawyers. They're like, I used to be a lawyer. I went to law school. And so, I mean, I feel like that would be a broad enough niche to be like, hey, do you go to law school, but you're not a lawyer today and you're trying to get your life together? Like, come listen to the podcast, because it's just one of those things. I mean, I could literally think off the top of my head, probably 5 or 6 people that they went to law school and they are not practicing law today, but it was around the expectations of like, oh, I thought it was going to make me a lot of money, or, my parents, somebody in my life influenced me to do it. And I realized I was doing it for the wrong reason. So I feel like that could be part of your like shtick for your show is, just finding out that demographic that you feel like you could relate most to, because you'll be able to talk to them so specifically in a way that if it was just your average business podcast, it wouldn't really resonate with, I guess, the audience as much, because you're not a Dave Ramsey today. And because you don't have this mega presence online. But you can. And this is where I think people get uncomfortable with that idea, because they're like, oh, it's just me. It's just my story. How can I get that way? But if you really look at everybody else's story and how it got there, the people that are super generic and talk to everyone, you forget about them because you don't have that resignation. You don't see yourself in their story. But to your point, and you've said it a few times, I talk about the fact that I was a stay-at-home mom that had no idea what I was doing for a while. And I have women and stay-at-home parents often reach out to me and say, hey, like, I love that you started with just an idea and you were motivated to make it work. And then here you are. So having little pieces of your story injected into your content along the way will kind of help you fill out who that niche is, even if you don't know exactly who it is when you're starting, but just kind of have that in the back of your mind. Like, who am I talking to? Who do I really want to help with this? Does that help?
Yeah, I think it does. And the funny thing is I don't know, and listening to your stuff, I don't know if I really, it doesn't exactly go along with your point, but until I heard that element of your story, like I had and I'm obviously not a stay-at-home mom, at least not yet. Joke. But that when I heard that personal part of it is when I felt like I really like started to identify you. Like that's when it became more real to me, and your content. I started seeing like, oh, okay, now I get it. Yeah. And so I guess being more personal, like you said, being general, nobody connects with you. You start sharing some of yourself, and then people really can connect even in weird ways.
Yeah. And it's funny because I have some students of mine, like they were in, I'm trying to think if it was last year or the year before, but it's a friend of mine who her husband wanted to start a podcast, and they have a fantasy football podcast. And they kept saying like, we have this idea. It's kind of crazy. We don't know if it's going to work. And I was like, well, what is it? And when they told me what it was, and I'm giving them a shout out. So Kemper, his podcast is called Fold in the Cheese. And I was like, is that related to Schitt's Creek? Like the show Schitt's Creek? And he was like, yes, like you get it. You understand it. And so what they do is they have these characters every time. I think that they've done like Starsky and Hutch, like it's him and his buddy, like they come on. And they have this weird angle on fantasy football because they're like, well, we're just two dudes, that love football. We want to talk about it. How do we stand out? And so they had this wild idea. I was like, I don't judge. Sure. If that's what y'all want to do, go for it. If you're creative and you like that idea so every time as a new episode, they come on as these different characters, and they're getting to do what they love. They love talking about fantasy football and the seasons and everything that's going on. And that's how they brought that creative element to it. So I think that and this, for anybody listening, that's like, I'm not creative. I have no idea how to do any of that stuff. Sometimes it takes just getting started, because what I hear often from people that have taken my program, they've gone through my courses, they say it took me about 3 months, because that's around 12 to 15 episodes in. And that can feel a little like, oh, it's going to take me that long to figure it out. What happens is once you start putting it out and you start telling people, hey guys, I got this podcast. Can you listen to it? Give me some feedback. People will start listening and actually give you feedback and say, oh, this one episode really resonated with me, or this is the one where I felt like, you were talking specifically to me. And even if you don't have a big audience currently, the numbers will tell you. That's like the beautiful thing about podcasting is I can go into my stats right now and see, well, this was the number 1 episode that's ever been downloaded. This is the number 2. This is number 3. So once you have more data and like analytics to make those decisions, it just becomes easier to see the trends of like, okay, people really like this. They didn't care for this one, because I'm still surprised whenever I get a whole bunch of downloads. I'll think, okay, this is the one I worked so hard on it. And I did all this editing and all these fancy things, and it falls flat. But then I'll do one where I'm like, I'm in the car waiting at the orthodontist, for my son, and I'm recording on my phone. And then that's the one that gets more downloads. So just putting stuff out there will help you see what your audience really wants. And that's how you can kind of track and see those trends.
So you mentioned there telling your friends and family about it. Yes. So did you, that's a major mental hump for me. Yeah. I'm happy to record something and share it with strangers. It's people, I would rather not my personal Facebook friends know that this is happening.
Yeah.
Was that just not an issue for you, or is that an issue you see people having, or?
Yes, it's very common. It's very common. So anybody listening, and to you, Jordan, like it is a very common thing, especially if it's something that isn't something you've done before. So let's say, it wasn't something related to one of your businesses or something that, like, let's say it was cooking, right? You're like, oh, I do all these things, but you're like, I'm going to start a cooking podcast and you're really excited about it. And you're like in this own little creative bubble that you're having so much fun and you're trying these things, you're interviewing these people. But as soon as you tell someone and they're like, you're doing what? You're talking about what? It's like your creative bubble is popped and you just get super deflated thinking, you just start questioning yourself like, well, should I be doing this? Should I be talking about something else? Should I have not talked to this guest? Like all these doubts start flooding in. So what I recommend doing, especially if you know people that may be critical of what you're doing, don't share it with them until you're like, okay, I'm like 5 episodes in, I've got my groove. Like just do it kind of under the radar. And you don't have to tell a whole bunch of people, but you will need to, as you want to grow your show, start getting out there in ways that could be sharing it on social media. If you have an email list, like sharing it on your email list or guesting on other people's
There's another
podcasts.
topic you hear people talk about all the time that
yes.
So many things, Crystal.
Yeah. There's a lot of things and it's easy to get overwhelmed by everything. I mean, I still do this today. I see somebody else in the industry that's a few years ahead of me and they're doing all these fancy things with these cool technologies. But at the end of the day, I'm like I have to remind myself, I'm like, they have a team of 25 people behind them and they have all these extra, places where they can invest their money and they're doing all these fancy ad spins. Like I don't have that budget and I don't have those resources right now. So I just kind of put a pin in that. Maybe we'll revisit it in a year, 5 years, 10 years, whenever like I'm kicking the can further down the road, because at the end of the day, I can just do what I can right now with the resources that I have. So don't let those doubts come into your head. Like, even if you just have to publish it just for you for a little bit, and then, maybe tell a few people that you trust, your best friends, your wife, your parents, like whoever you feel super, super comfortable telling, and then just kind of wait and see what happens. But again, back to the discoverability thing, if you're just doing podcasting, it's not likely that someoe's just going to stumble on your podcast. But if you are on YouTube, you are like, if you have the right keywords and the right tagging, like you said, YouTube's a whole other monster when it comes to all the additional things that you have to do to be discovered. But you're also opening yourself up to the trolls on YouTube as well. Yeah. And I can tell you, I've been doing this for 5 years. I just got trolled today. Like I posted something on YouTube and it was like, I put 2 podcast experts talking about marketing. And the first comment on there was like, podcast experts, ? I've never heard of either of these people. Like, looks like the algorithm's just letting anybody in here or something. There was 2 really nasty comments as soon as I got there, but I've got tough skin. I've like conditioned myself to get there. I didn't just dive all in. And I feel like that can be a little tricky for someone that's in that vulnerable position. They're putting themselves out there. And then all of a sudden you're getting really harsh criticism, because that is what unfortunately is online. And you're gonna kind of have to separate the fact from the people that are just miserable posting stuff online,
which there are plenty of.
Yes.
Especially on YouTube.
Yes, exactly.
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
So, I may be rethinking just my entire, well, not that I clearly don't have a comprehensive strategy here, but it's like when you started, you started podcasting. I know you do YouTube now, but originally you were just podcasting.
Just
right?
Podcasting for let me see. So 2018 I started, and then I didn't start really posting consistently on YouTube until 2019, like the end of the year. So I was about a year, probably 10 months into my podcasting
Still, if you were going to start
journey.
posting on YouTube, that was pretty good timing.
Yeah, it was good. But the next best time is today, is to get started. And honestly, for anybody that's listening, YouTube. So if you're going to record and put it on YouTube, you may have better success in putting out shorts. So those short clips of your podcast instead of the full. You could still post the entire full video if you wanted to, but you'll see a lot of traction if you post like short, 60-second, 30-second clips of your podcast episodes, because that's really what is feeding the monster, the algorithm right now. But at the end of the day, I still believe you need to have a meatier piece of content that people like, that's your home base on YouTube, where they could listen to the full, 10, 20, 30 minutes, however long your episodes are going to be. And you have it in that one place where if they stumble onto your YouTube channel, they can actually find something of value.
So on episode length, did you set an episode length that you were going to stick to from the beginning, or did you kind of, choose your topics and then make each episode fit however much you had on that topic, or how did that work for you?
Yeah, this is a good question. And I get this question all the time too. It is one, let me ask you something. Do you see yourself doing solo episodes, interviews, both? What are you thinking?
So for the podcast, I mean, my goal with the podcast would be honestly more selfish than it would be like to create a following or anything. I see it, and I have recorded. So I've recorded 3 conversations so far. I would see it as an interview thing, as a way for me to get to talk to people like you, that I want to talk to. So
that's great.
And I've just realized how time consuming it is to try to even come up with anything solo. I mean, maybe not for you, because you seem to be able to just crank this stuff out at will. But for us mere mortals, it just seems way more organic and easy. I can, come up with a list of questions that I want to ask a certain person and have a 30 to 40 minute episode right there, as long as I can get them to, Zoom with me for a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, at this point, I've recorded over 1,100 podcast episodes.
Insane.
So
absolutely insane.
This is why I could do a solo episode a lot easier than anybody just starting. But I did 10 interviews. I did 10 interviews before I ever did a solo episode. Really? So you're on the right track, because I had to feel comfortable first, like in what I was doing and figuring things out. And then I kind of got on a roll, like, oh, you know what? I think I could talk about this one topic by myself. And then that's when I kind of got up the courage to do it. So you're on the right track. Like you're still, you could be a superhero just like me very soon, Jordan. I'm telling you, it's you can do it. But okay. So if that's the case, so if you're doing interviews, then I think that that's perfect to like use on YouTube. The only thing is editing. And this is where it freaks people out when people are like, I can't do it. So, I mean,
and I'm like the world's biggest technophobe. So I cannot do it myself, at least not podcast editing.
Yeah. It's something that I will say was a much, much bigger learning curve too. So if anybody's listening, you're like, should I do audio or video? Audio is way easier when it comes to editing and, exporting and doing like uploading and all the things. It's just a lot easier working with an audio file. But video, it's a lot easier when you have an interview, simply because you have, you're working with 2 people and it just makes more sense, and you can edit out big chunks if like there's a mistake or something else. But I love the fact that you're doing. So let me go back to your original question about length, right? So you're doing interviews only. I don't set a time limit for interviews outside of what the constraints are for me and my guest. So if we have an hour to sit and chat and we only end up going for 45 minutes, like worth of actual what's good and what we can put in the episode, then that's what I'll use. If we end up going over, I've talked to people an hour and a half because I'm like, hey, like I know we're at time, but can you talk for a little bit more? And they're like, yeah, sure. Let's keep going. So we'll keep talking for a lot longer. So I don't really set a time constraint. It's just what feels natural. I have been in an hour-long interview that should have ended after 12 minutes. Yeah. That is just painstakingly like, like I was asking questions and they were like, yep, nope. Just very short. So you'll have that. You will have that. If anybody's listening and you're new to interviewing, you will absolutely have people that you interview that feels like you're pulling teeth. And I've recorded a few episodes on interview selection, like how to get the right guest on your show. So make sure you listen to those episodes because that can help you avoid some of those disasters. But I also tell people start with your friends and people that are in your network, like people that you already know. Hey, we talk all the time about these things, or, you know, you've spoken up about this topic before. I would love to get your ideas on it, even if it's just an acquaintance, because then you're not starting from like a total stranger, because that could be really, really awkward. And honestly, I don't even do that anymore. Like people that come onto my podcast, they are not strangers to me. They have either been vetted by an agency. Yeah. You're not a stranger. We met in person.
That's true. We met
in person. We talked about podcasting for like an hour one day.
I tried to ask you every question I could back then.
Yes, exactly. You weren't ready, but now you're ready. Now you're ready and you came back. So
we think I am.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have to talk about this real fast because I want to know. So the people listening to this did not have the pleasure of listening to you speak on stage at Dave Ramsey's influencer event. Well, no, my talk, my second day it wasn't as good. I will throw that out. I changed it. I shouldn't have done it. Big mistake, but
I thought it was good, but
Jordan's, I could still remember your opening line, and I'm actually going to go speak on stage next month. And I think I'm going to steal your line. So this is what he said. Okay. Are you ready? This is his line. So there I was, and it had me hooked right from the beginning. And then he started talking about there was money shredded from a lawnmower and all. And I was just like, what is happening right now? So I have to know where that came, because I remember you told me, but I want you to tell the audience like the origin of that opening line that you had for your talk.
So there I was. I'm actually ashamed to admit this, and this no one should emulate this strategy. But did I tell you this? Where it came
You told
from?
me about it. It was from your frat house or from college.
Yes, in my fraternity in college. Anytime you were going to tell a story, which was all the time. I mean, all kinds of legendary stories. You had to start. Like they wouldn't let you continue if you didn't start with. So there I was. So I repurposed that. For that talk that day.
I'm totally stealing it. I think it was so good because every single thing you said after that, like I was hooked. I was like, what is he talking about? Like, so there I was like, and then you started like going into the whole story. Oh my gosh. I wish we had recordings of that because there were so many people, their talks were incredible, but I definitely remembered everything about your story because it was incredible. But
that's
I love
the only bit of value I got out of my fraternity. I will tell you that.
Hey, but look where it got you on stage at Dave Ramsey. Come on. Like, yeah.
Well, I want to know about that. How did you I assume they contacted you because of your success with your podcast and everything. So how did that come about?
So I'm really interested in how you got chosen too, because I came in like last minute because I think that they started inviting everyone because that was in November. I got my invitation in like early October. Like they had told me, they're like, we already sent out invitations in September. So I was like late to the game. I didn't even know what was going on. I got a random email from someone and I had to look her up on LinkedIn. It was one of the recruiters. And I was like, wait, is this person legit? Is this really a thing? Because I'd been following Dave Ramsey. I'd done Financial Peace, and taught it so many times. And so she was telling me that they have this bot, I guess, that crawls the internet looking for where Dave Ramsey's been mentioned or Rachel Cruz, Christy Wright. And I had gone to Business Boutique and had podcasted about it. I had, talked about Christy Wright before. I talked about Dave Ramsey in my content. And so that's what she told me. She was like, I found out about you because you had these like hits in our SEO algorithms that told us, you might be a good fit. And then they looked more into me. But what about you? How are you contacted for it?
So mine's that's very interesting. I've had a kind of a long-term relationship with them. Like you, I've led FPU, for a long time, and, I've just dropped in from time to time and, struck up relationships with various people there, which they, have been unbelievably generous as they were to us when we were there. But yeah, I don't know. A bot didn't find me.
Yeah.
I found them.
That's so awesome. But it's so crazy, like just to think about how all that happened. And so if anybody's listening and y'all have seen Jade, so Jade's one of the new Ramsey personalities. She was there. She was actually my partner. I don't know if you remember that, but she was my coaching partner with Rachel
really?
Cruz.
I didn't know that.
It was Jade and I. And so it was so fun. After I saw that she was speaking on stage at her first Ramsey event, I was like, oh my gosh. And I like messaged her. I was like, this is insane. So fun. But they do amazing things over there. And I think that it just goes to show you, like back to what we were talking about, at the beginning of this, that you have to leave some room in there for some really cool things to happen that you would have never expected. I would have never in a million years, if you'd have told me like, you're going to meet Dave Ramsey, you're going to get one-on-one coaching with Rachel Cruz, and you're going to like have this happy hour where you get to talk to Christy Wright and George, like I would have never believed you because I was such a mega fan of them for a long time and all the incredible things that they were doing. And so it's just one of those wild things that you just have to keep going. Like, I think that's the biggest mistake that people make is they get 5-10 episodes into their podcast and they say it's not working, nobody's listening. But at the end of the day, I can look back at those Genesis moments in 2018. I didn't know what I was doing. I ended up rebranding thinking I'm going to make a terrible mistake. No one's going to listen to it. No one's going to like what I'm changing it to. And here I am today, just stubbornly not willing to give up.
You still haven't answered my question though. Back to the beginning. That is obviously what separates you from the pack, is that you kept going. And I've heard whatever the stat is, most podcasts don't make it past their 7th episode or whatever. Yeah. What is it that, and I don't know anything about your family or financial situation, but what is it that kept you would be so many, I would think, I know there are so many reasons for someone in your situation to have quit or said, you know what, I'm just going to go work at Target for 20 hours a week or whatever, which is fine. But what was it, just like, I'm going to do this, or did you just have the bug inside you and you couldn't stop, or what? How do you explain it for you?
So it's 3 things that come to mind. One is when one of my boys, they wrote on their like schoolwork piece of paper, they said, I want to be a podcaster when I grow up. I was like, oh my gosh, like, okay, like they see what I'm doing, even if it wasn't making a ton of money, even if it wasn't making a dime, like they saw that I was having fun and they could just genuinely see that. That was a big thing. The second thing is, I mean, this probably should have been first, but I love to talk. Like it's just like, I love sitting here chatting with you about this. I love helping people and answering questions. And I love that about, podcasting and just creating content in general. It genuinely makes me happy. And then the third thing, and this was a really big impact that came about a year after I had started, that I just was in this like, should I keep going? What am I doing? And I met a student, her name was Lori, and she wanted to help people that had lost their sons or lost children. And I was like, whoa, because she had lost her adult son. And she said, I just know that there's a story that I have to share, like how to get through this grief, this unimaginable grief. And I just remember thinking, I have no idea how to help her. Like, I don't know how to tell you how to, craft these episodes where they're gentle and like heartfelt. And like, I didn't know any of that, but she knew. She was the expert in that. And I remember thinking this was a sign from God. It was a validating moment in my journey where he was like, it's not about you. It's about you helping her. And it's about you helping other people share their message. And that was just a charge that I have felt very sternly throughout my journey when I fall into that doubt. Like, why do I keep going? Like, I'm not making millions of dollars. I'm not really even making a ton of money in most of the things that I'm doing in my content. But I get those little validating nuggets here and there where someone will send me something like, thank you so much. I started my podcast and I've helped these people and I've reached this audience that's not being served online. And so it's those little things. Trust me, I've wanted to quit several times and then I'll get this little message or something here and there where people are saying, oh, you just made such a difference. I'm like, well, I can't stop now. Like I have to keep going. So that's what's kept me going.
All right. I respect that. That's that makes sense. And I guess there are, people like me who have in the past who have tried to start and whatever reason haven't gotten I feel like you gotta go to get to those moments that'll then keep you going, and you did. And I'm really excited to see how much your following has grown in the last year since we met. And you're obviously excellent at what you do, so it's inspirational to me to get started, keep going, and maybe someday, Crystal.
Well, thank you so much, Jordan. That's really sweet. But I have to tell you, you got to just rip off the Band-Aid. You got to rip off the Band-Aid. And even if that means recording a few things and totally trashing them, like deleting them altogether and be like, that was awful, I don't want to share that. It's fine. Delete it. No one will know. This is what I tell, but people get so nervous. They're like, well, I recorded this interview with this really prestigious person and it just wasn't really what I thought it was going to be, or I thought it was going to be better and it was really crappy. And I want to honor them and I want to do this. And I'm like, if you just don't publish it for a little bit, like people understand podcasting schedules, just say, oh, that'll be published in like 6 months. People get it. So I just let people know, like, there's so much flexibility on the back end on what you can do. There's no like hard and fast rules that you have to stick to. Make it make sense for you, for your family, for your career, like whatever kind of schedules and limitations you're trying to live within, do that and you will be successful. Like you will be able to continue going forward and doing it, but hitting publish really is, it's the hardest thing, just putting out that first episode. So I'm going to give you an assignment. Okay.
Oh gosh.
As in true,
I didn't sign up for this.
True coaching passion. I'm going to give you an assignment. I want you to pick a launch date when you're going to put your podcast. It could be in September. It could be December. I don't care when it is. I recommend you pick a launch date, circle it on your calendar and say, okay, however many episodes I need to record before this date, I'm going to hit publish on one episode. You could put out more if you want, but one episode that you're going to make go live by that date. And then I want you to record a trailer and put it out there too. That says, hi, I'm Jordan. This is the name of my podcast. You can expect a new episode or, launch date, whatever. I have YouTube videos on this too. So you can go to my YouTube channel and see how to do a trailer.
Do that. That's good. That will be helpful in me narrowing down like what it's going to be and what I'm going to be talking about and all that stuff too. So that's a good assignment.
Yeah.
I accept your assignments.
Okay, good. Cause we're going to ask for an update. I'm going to have to get an update on what's going on. You'll have to tell us. Do you know when you're Do you know when you're going to launch? You don't have to say the date.
I need some time to think about what my launch date's going to be honest with you, Crystal.
Think about it. Find something that works for you and just make it happen. Say, come hell or high water, I'm going to publish on this date, because I feel like that's what most people need. They need that hard date of, I'm going to make it, no matter if it's perfect or not, I'm going to publish on this date.
That's good advice. Maybe that's what I've been lacking all this time. So, but I'm not going to commit to it right here on
the spot
on your podcast. But I will set a launch date and I will record a trailer.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I know you have a heart out in just a few minutes. So I do want to ask you real fast because I have some rapid fire questions that I have to ask all of our guests. Right. Okay. So what's a brand new piece of advice that you would give to another podcaster?
I would say subscribe to the Profit Podcast channel on YouTube. Although what is your YouTube handle?
It's Crystal Profit. Yeah.
Crystal Profit. Okay.
Yeah.
That would be my number one, and get a private coaching session, which I'm hoping we're going to have every week going forward.
Yes.
But that's just for me. That's not for anybody else. So,
Okay. What's the dream podcast you would love to be on, and who's your dream podcast guest?
Oh gosh. Lots, I guess. I mean, I would have to say the Ramsey Show would be the podcast, since it is technically a podcast, and that's where we met. And then podcast guest. So you may not know who this is, but there's an economist named Thomas Sowell, who is also like early 90s, and so statistically he's not going to be around a whole lot longer. So I would love to have him on as a guest.
That's awesome.
Just one of the most brilliant minds that I know of. So
that's awesome. Okay. And my last question is, do you consider yourself a perfectionist?
So I do, but I hate that moniker because people claim that as if it's like a good thing, or as if you can achieve perfection. For me, it just ends up being like, I need this to be better. It never gets perfect. And then I just get frustrated. So that we should have broached that topic as well. Because I don't know where the line is between like needs to be better and you got to ship this. Yeah. And I struggle with that. So I would say yes, but I in no way wear it as a badge of honor. It's just mainly a badge of procrastination.
Yeah. Yeah. That's okay. We're going to work on that. That's a very good, honest answer, because I don't think you're alone in that. I think some people are nodding like really hard right now along with you. And I'm a recovering perfectionist. So I totally, I've been there. And I think that it is a form of procrastination, but I also think that it's a high standard, like that you can hold yourself to and balance that line of perfectionism and just having really high quality expectations on what you're creating. And I think that there's a way to get there and it not hold you back in creating. So
that's what I'm looking for, is finding that standard and that balance.
Yeah. Oh, Jordan, this was so fun. I'm so glad you reached out to me because this was great. Do you have any place online where people can find you today?
I do have a website, jordantehall.com, but it is, like most people, like many websites I've been to, just not in great shape. So maybe don't go there. You can find me on Facebook, Jordan at facebook.com/JordanTHall, and YouTube, which I think my handle is like at Jordan Hall something. I really need to iron these things out.
Yeah.
Obviously we need more coaching, but
yes. Yeah. Well, we'll link to it. And so anybody, they can come find you, but thank you so much for today. This was really fun.
Thank you, Crystal.
I just have the biggest smile on my face re-listening to that interview because it was so fun to catch up with Jordan, but to hear his questions and hear his story and just overall curiosity about creating content and, should I do podcast and YouTube and like all the questions that he has, I get all the time. Like, I don't think people understand that. I think that there's people listening to this podcast right now that had questions just like Jordan. Like maybe you were nodding along and you were saying, yes, this is the same place. Like I am stuck in this one area and he asked the same question. Maybe I'm not alone. You are not alone. There are so many of you listening in this audience that have been wanting to start a podcast, have wanting to start a YouTube channel, and you're trying to like put all these pieces together, and maybe you're overwhelmed by the tech or the decisions to buy this microphone or that camera or have this kind of setup, or your background is ugly, or all these things. And at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that you get into action, whether that's picking your podcast launch date or deciding on the artwork that you're going to have for your YouTube channel or planning out your next 5 pieces of content. You have to get into action. You can't just sit around and listen to this podcast and watch people on YouTube and download courses that you never go through. You never put those things into action because it's not going to work. You actually have to do something in order to create something. Because at the end of the day, they call us content creators, right? I'll take it. I'm like, I don't really call myself a content creator. I guess I am. I call myself a podcaster, YouTuber, like coach, all these other things. But content creator is one of those that still feels a little funny, like to me. I don't know why that is, but we create things. We do. We create something. And if you're not trying to record something, what are you creating? This is my question. Like these are the final thoughts that I want you to think about as you leave this episode today. I want that question to sit with you. What are you creating? And maybe you have a very quick answer. You're like, Crystal, I'm doing all the things. I'm creating all the things. Well, we have another episode for you. We have other pieces of content for you if you're trying to manage a lot of things. But this is specifically to those of you that have been listening to this show maybe for years and you still haven't ripped the Band-Aid off. You still haven't gotten into action. What are you creating? This is no judgment. This is none of that. This is me asking you, what are you creating? Because if you're saying, well, Crystal, I'm not creating anything, then let's talk about it. Why not? Like, let's unpack it. Let's dig deeper. Like, send me an email. Like, let's do this. Like, do this. Like, I'm so sick of everybody saying, I can't do it. I don't know where to start. I don't know. You have over 400 episodes that have been on this podcast. There's thousands of episodes on the Potty Report. There's countless YouTube videos that you can go watch to actually make things happen, like the logistics of it. But why haven't you started? Why haven't you? And I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm going to leave it at that today because I feel like it's getting in that territory of like, oh, you're pushing hard, like we're making people uncomfortable. It's the tough love that we need. But I also don't want to discourage you. I want you to be inspired to create. And you can't create in a place of fear. And you can't create in a place of embarrassment. You can't create in a place where you feel like, there's so much pressure for everything that I do to succeed. Trust me, I've been there. I'm speaking from experience on this. I can't create in any of those situations either. But I am going to keep coming back. If you turned on this episode, I hope you turn on the next one because I'm going to come back with you every single time for some tough love. And I'm going to give it to you in a way that makes sense, that it's relative, that it's relatable, that it is something you can actually do to get into action today. So that's my question. That's what we're going to end on. What are you creating today? But that's all I have for you. So as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners. Thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.